Hi, and welcome to the Notepad Show. In today's episode, we're going to be doing a tutorial on how to create an underwater ocean shot. This is the kind of shot that we're looking to do. So you have caustics, and it's hitting all the different surfaces. And surprise, we have a little bit of volumetric constant fog going on with some light rays coming down, crepuscular beams, I believe they're called, God rays. Okay, so this is the kind of shot we're going to be doing. So let's get started. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create and show how to create a constant volume. That's the big first step in a scene like this. So I have a predefined test scene, okay, that is pretty simple. I'm not going to use the dome light or the left or right light, and I'm going to position the overhead light. You know what? I think I'm going to leave it there. We'll see how it goes. So we're just going to have the three spheres and the floor. And let me add a ROP and hit render. Pretty basic scene here. Okay. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a geo. And I'm going to pull out of the scene here. So there's my camera, the floor, and the three spheres. So the first thing we want to do when creating constant fog is we're going to create what's called an RI volume. An RI volume is an aggregate volume. So when you bring in a VDB, that is an RI volume to RenderMan. You're applying a PXR surface to it, a PXR volume to it, and it's got density, and yeah, you render a volume. So we're going to be doing the same thing, but we're going to be creating this from scratch. So a volume fog is just a box, and we are going to transform that box. I'm going to be really fast and rough here, so forgive me. Just pulling out to a certain distance. That's good. And that's good too. And we'll scale up a little bit. All right, then we're going to put a match size. And I'm just doing that to get it so that it sits right on top of the grid. Okay. And here we go. So this is our volume, and we're inside of it. And I'm going to turn this volume into, and it's going to sound confusing, into a VDB. But I'm not going to write the VDB to hard disk. In Houdini, when you put down the VDB from Polygon, RenderMan's going to know that this is a VDB and treat it as such. We are going to turn off the SDF by default. When you put down a VDB from Polygon, it creates a SDF, and we're going to change that to be an actual, fog volume with a density attribute associated with it. I'm also going to be putting down a wrangle, a volume wrangle. And this volume wrangle is going to drive in real time my density. Now, there is a way to drive density. I'm going to go 0.01. fact, I might go a little bit higher. I might go 0.5. There we go. That's good. Good starting point. This is based on what I see as my scene scale. It's a fairly small scene, so I don't need a big density here. Okay. I'm going to label this. Okay. Now, normally I'm going to add a spare parameter to this geo. And when I go into the geometry section, there is a place where you can adjust the density multiplier, density roll-off. These parameters can't be changed in real time while an IPR is running. If you change a parameter here, you have to stop and restart the IPR. I hope that's something that gets eventually fixed. It's been around for a couple releases of RenderMan, so I'm not sure. We'll have to see. But for right now, the workaround that I found that works for me is I put down a wrangle and I just adjust the density here in this single line of vex code. So of course, I'm going to put down a PXR builder, call it, I don't know, volume material, volume shader. Okay. Put down a PXR volume, that is our shader, and I'm going to be applying that to this box, this RI volume. I also have to match up the density parameter. So the density float prim bar matches up with the prim bar that is created when we go and do a VDB from Polygon. Now, I realize that not everybody has RenderMan, Houdini, and some will have Maya or Blender. In those cases, you would just use the RenderMan intended workflow of creating the RI volume. Blender, I believe, has a primitive that you can create called the volume box. And that's essentially, that is what this is right here. So in Blender, it's actually a lot easier. It's much quicker to create. Okay. So we have the shader created. I'm going to assign it to this volume box. There we go. So we are done. Now, I know instinctively I'm going to have to give it a little bit more light and maybe even go a little bit higher in translation. But I'm going to look through the camera and I'm going to start the IPR. And here it is. Here's our distance fog. And we have a volume. Now, certainly this does not look like a underwater scene yet. Now, I have two choices. I'm really debating this as I'm thinking about it. Do I do it here? Let's try and do it right here and turn this into water, okay? So now that we have this constant fog enveloping our scene, enveloping everything, the next step is, one of the things that convincingly makes water or the underwater look is the color of the volume. Now, in past episodes on the channel, especially in my cloud rendering video, I said you really don't want to play with diffuse color when doing clouds. When doing an effect like this, you do want to use diffuse color. And like in that tutorial, the cloud tutorial, small increments, nothing big. That is enough right there to give me sort of a bluish tinge here. Okay. So we're starting to get somewhere. But the biggest thing that can sell underwater is caustics. So I'm going to show you guys how to add caustics the cheap way, the really cheap way. Generally, you could do caustics in VCM, which is the other integrator that comes with RenderMan. You don't have to use path trace. You could use VCM, and you could do real-time caustics, but they are incredibly expensive, and VCM actually doesn't work with volumes. PXR Unified works with volumes and has a VCM bidirectional path tracer. So PXR Unified can be used, but again, very expensive. Even with some of the helpers that are out there to do that kind of a thing. Like in PXR Unified, there's something called manifold walking that can aid. Manifold walking, I like to describe it as, it's sort of like how MS Approximate was a helper in rendering clouds where you didn't need to have as many bounces in your path trace. Okay. In fact, I am going to increase the bounces here. I think that might help with the rendering. And also I'm going to match, always good to match up when dealing with volumes. Always good to match up the parameter with max diffuse depth. There we go. Okay. So a little more bounces in the scene. But how do we get caustics to show up here on the ground plane? Okay. The other thing I should probably do is give a little bit of, put a little texturing in. So I'm just going to put down a matte white. And then on the spheres, why don't we make them ceramic and we'll make them pink. Okay. All right. So let's add some caustics through a light filter. First thing you want to do is type in light filter, and there's several here. Barn door light filter. Self-explanatory if you understand what a barn door is. There is a web page right here. I'll include the link to the active filters that are included with RenderMan. Two of these filters, Gobo and Blocker, are sort of depreciated. And light filters don't affect photon emission in VCM or PXR Unified. And you're going to see that the light filter will actually block light. All right. And even in the case of this cookies, when I put down the caustics, you'll see I have to really push the lights to get illumination. So you'll see that in a moment. I am going to be using the PxR cookie light filter to do this effect. So without further ado, let's add it. So we add the light filter, PxR cookie. We're going to pull out of the scene here. I'm going to turn off the volume just for a second to make it easier to see. Okay. And in PxR cookie, when you go to your parameters, it defaults to physical. Now, the physical mode is it will use how the PxrCookie, it's parented to a rec light. It's supposed to be parented to a rec light. And the physical mode you'll control how the texture that's projected from the light, how it appears in the scene based on how big the light filter is, how far away it is from the source light. And I've always had challenges getting the physical mode to work right, to tweak it to look good. I tend to use analytic mode. And analytic mode, it uses settings like scale to drive how the texture appears in the projection. I can also adjust the width and the height of the actual cookie. So once we have the cookie light filter parented to the source light, we then have to go into render tab and then the shader tab, and we have to add this cookie light filter to the light, so it knows to associate it with the light. That's it. That's all you have to do. And I'll see if I can bring it up. There it is. Wasn't showing up. I'm going to put this to hidden white. There we go. It's a little bit easier now. So this is the light filter, and here's the light. I'm going to keep the cookie light at its size, but I could change it. Could make it bigger. And that would just give illumination on, let's say, the surface right here on this grid, a bigger area of illumination for the texture that I'm about to project. And why don't we bring up that texture? This texture is an animated sequence. It's animated caustics. And I'm going to include the HIP file that allows me to create this. These are created in Houdini. This generator, this caustic generator, is done in Houdini. And I'm just going to tell you right now, I've done searches for a caustic generator, and a lot of them are old and have limitations on the size of the map, or you have to pay money for it. Entagma, which is a YouTube channel dedicated to Houdini, has two videos, part 1 and part 2, that show how caustics are created. Now, I've watched these, done the tutorial, and created a file that combines both of these so that it is a version of the generator that is well suited for RenderMan. It is a tileable texture. So the caustics, when written to disk, are tileable, which is a huge deal. I'll give a link in the description to those tutorials for sure. So I'm going to turn the volume back on, and let's start an actual IPR. See where we are right away with the animated caustics. Okay. So right away, you see that they're really taking up a very small area. I thought that could be a problem, and we have several choices. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move the light back up higher. And that because it's parented, I'm actually going to move it fairly fairly nice. And I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. So I'm going to make the light, the source light, bigger. I'm going to put it to 5. I'm also going to look through the light so I can better sort of aim things where I want them to be. And I want the light to be like, I don't know, like that. Okay. So the cookie, I think, is a little bit too small, but I have a choice. I could just go to the projection and tile it. Now, when I do that, like I told you, I have to boost up the intensity. Okay? I have to boost up the intensity. Okay? The other thing I'm going to do, like I mentioned, I could have made the width and height higher, bigger, but it's just easier enough to just go in and tile it because it's a tileable texture. Now I'm going to make the UV twice as big. Sorry, the other way. 0.25. I always do that. Much better. So you're sort of getting an idea. I'm all right with the color. To be honest with you, I want to make it look more like a pool, and maybe change the hot pink to, well, a different color. Maybe, yeah, yellow. I think that might be a little bit better. Yellow and green, or greenish blue. There we go. Now, again, I'm going to go to change the color. You got to be really, really careful. Shift it this way. See there, it's like a swampy, like in the bayou of, Louisiana or Florida. You have a lot of control over the look. We're getting somewhere. There we go. Now we're starting to get there. Now, like I've mentioned in the tutorial on clouds, the other big factor here is the actual color of the light can have an effect. So I'm going to demonstrate that now. So I gave it a little bit of a color temperature, and we're back. It's sunlight, and we're back to sort of this bluish green. So, you got to balance it. I can go to the extreme, and you can really see that's a really warm sunlight right there. And I can go really cool. Maybe not that cool. Like that. And these changes have a huge effect on the scene. Okay? And that's it. The crispicular beams, also called God rays, are a byproduct of the fact that we're the projection from the light to the surface of we'll call it a pool for sake of argument. The light areas are cutting through the density of the volume and just giving us this really nice effect. You see that there's light the light is showing up in the scene. I can do some things in the shader, or I can, do a trace set so that the light doesn't show up in the reflection. Actually, I think I might be able to do something right here. Take off the specular amount and do a new render. And yeah, the reflection goes away. So specular amount, like, sort of keeps the reflection there. I can turn it down, do whatever I need to do. Okay. A lot of information here. A lot to take in, I know. But we have the volume was the first part of it. And the second part is the cookie that cuts through. Okay. And you can get a ton of information on filters and how different filters are used. There's a filter for intensity where you have a little bit more control than your standard intensity exposure here. Some really interesting effects that you can do. I do want to bring up another scene. This is, I'm not going to save it. This is the underwater shot that I showed you earlier. So it's the same kind of setup. We got the rec light, the cookie, the very same map, and it's an image sequence. Here's the tag, so you can tag it. It's $, squiggly bracket, F3, and squiggly bracket. Okay. That's for Houdini. It might be different for your DCC. And I can do a rendering here. And we got a shot. Now, right now I could end the video. I could end the tutorial. But there's one more thing. There's one more thing I want to show. And this is a really cool thing that I learned from Leif Pedersen at Pixar. So shout out to Leif for his help with this. I'm going to see. I can do changing of the color of the diffuse shader to be the default white, like I'm doing right here. But as you can see, I have to re-render. So it'd be much nicer if I could go and do this in comp, in Nuke or Fusion, and have a little bit more control. So I'm going to show how to do that, how to isolate a volume. Okay? The volume, because RenderMan doesn't have a built-in way of separating out a volume, at least not yet, you have to do it manually. So you have to create a separate pass for a volume and then a separate pass where you don't include the volume and you marry the two in comp. So let's I'll show you how to do the volume only part first. You select all of your assets and you turn them into holdouts. That is de facto, has to be done. So now these objects, all of them, are holdouts. The bubbles, the rocks, the ship. There's some assets in here that are going to be holdouts. Okay? The ocean floor, of course, big time. And then you have the volume. Now, if I render now, we will get a volume only pass with a holdout of the affected geometry that the volume does affect. But there's no color information. You know, it's just, these are holdouts now. Okay? So we will take this pass into RenderMan. Into Nuke. So we would write out an EXR file that can be denoised, just like any other pass. But we have to do it manually. That's the only rub. And you can, you know, of course, do an EXR sequence. But you have to do it manually. And that includes like naming it. Like you would, you know, name it holdout. And, you know, write out your EXR sequence. So we would render this out and we would have that pass. Then we go back, turn all these back on. I know it's a pain, but this is the best, easiest way to do it for right now. And turn off the volume. So literally do not render the volume at all. And you render out this pass. You don't change anything on what you're doing, any of the lighting. And you render out your beauty pass, but without the volume. So let's go into Nuke. And here they are. So I got this pass right here. Everything but the volume. And I have this pass, the volume. Okay. To combine them, it's a simple matter of doing a merge with a plus. That's it. And then if we want to change the color of the water, look how easy that is to do. Okay. And we can have less influence. So maybe it's shallower water, or we can go really deep sea by just changing the lift a little bit. It's a little bit more murky, a little bit more spooky. You have some control here. I don't know why I'm having trouble with that. But yeah, you just have a lot of interesting control. What's Gamma do? You know, play. Find out what Gamma does. Okay? And that is how you do an underwater shot. I hope this was helpful. So on that note, I want to say have a great rest of your week and talk to you soon. Have fun. Bye.